The ranger's name was David Castillo. It was 11:47 in the morning, and the thermometer at Furnace Creek Visitor Center had already crossed 119 degrees Fahrenheit. He was standing at the trailhead entrance to Golden Canyon when he saw her, sunglasses on, phone raised, filming herself walking directly past a posted closure sign like it was a piece of furniture someone had left in her way. He stopped her. She smiled. She told him she'd done this trail 100 times. He noted her name, her vehicle, and the time. He radioed it in. The response came back within minutes. Advisory issued. No enforcement action taken. There was nothing legally actionable. She hadn't technically crossed a barrier, just ignored a recommendation. In the language of the Park Service, this was a voluntary risk situation. Castillo filed the report. He marked it exactly that way. That report would later become evidence in a federal investigation. Here's what you need to understand about Death Valley in summer. This is not a place that tolerates mistakes. It is the hottest, reliably recorded place on Earth. Air temperatures at Furnace Creek have reached 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and ground temperatures at Badwater Basin, the lowest point in North America, have been measured at 201 degrees. Not warm, not dangerous. 201 degrees. The ground can cook through the sole of a shoe. Every summer, Death Valley Rangers document thousands of incidents involving visitors who ignored closures, underestimated the heat, or simply didn't believe the signs applied to them. In 2023 alone, the park recorded 23 heat-related medical emergencies between June and August, a 40% increase over the 5-year average. Most end in emergency rescues. Some end in body recoveries. The summer this story takes place, there had already been 4 heat-related deaths in the park before July. This one ended in both. Castillo's report sat in a filing system. The woman drove away. And somewhere in the weeks between that morning and the day the warnings finally ran out, she was already planning her next trip. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't even close to the first time. So who was she, and why did the park keep letting her back in? Her name, for the purposes of this story, is Lauren. That's not what the investigation called her, but it's what people on the trail forums used, a username that became a warning. Lauren was 44 years old, physically fit in the way that becomes its own kind of armor. She ran half marathons. She posted her resting heart rate. She had built a modest but loyal following on social media, somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000 people who watched her frame rule-breaking as revelation. Her caption style was distinctive. A photo of a closure sign, her grinning in front of it, sunglasses pushed up. The only thing closed is other people's minds. Another from a Mosaic Canyon approach in 116-degree heat. Rangers said, "Don't." I said, "Watch me." The comments were full of fire emojis. Here's what makes Lauren genuinely difficult to dismiss as a cartoon villain. She was competent. Not in the way Death Valley demands, but enough. She had completed dozens of desert hikes without incident. She knew how to read a trail map. She carried electrolytes. She had, on paper, more experience than most of the people who were rescued from those same trails, and that experience had taught her exactly the wrong lesson. But here's the thing. Competence in forgiving environments is one of the most dangerous credentials a person can carry into an unforgiving one. The Mojave doesn't grade on a curve. The summer before the incident, a woman named Patricia, a fellow hiker who had joined Lauren on a Golden Canyon loop, later told investigators something that stopped them cold. She said Lauren had been approached by a ranger that day and warned about water rationing on the return leg. Lauren listened, nodded, and when the ranger walked away, turned to Patricia and said, "That's just liability theater." Liability theater. Patricia said she laughed at the time. She said she didn't go back out with Lauren after that. Rangers had formally documented 3 separate advisory contacts with Lauren across 2 consecutive summers: Golden Canyon, Mosaic Canyon, and a Badwater Basin approach conducted in 114-degree heat with a group of 4. Each time she was cooperative enough to avoid a formal violation. Each time she left without injury. Each time the park had no legal mechanism to stop her from returning. Death Valley has no day hike permit system. A formal exclusion order requires a documented violation caught in the act, and Lauren understood, perhaps intuitively, exactly where that line was. Her social media presence complicated things further. Followers meant witnesses. Witnesses meant scrutiny. Rangers who approached her were occasionally filmed, the encounters edited into content that framed caution as bureaucratic overreach. She had gotten away with it so many times in so many kinds of heat that the desert had stopped feeling like a threat. It had started feeling like a stage. Then she invited people she cared about to perform on it with her. Their names deserved to be said plainly before anything else. Marcus had known Lauren for 11 years. They'd met through a mutual friend at a trail running event in San Diego. And by every account from his family, he was the kind of person who showed up for moves, for breakups, for bad news delivered at kitchen tables. His sister told investigators he would have followed Lauren anywhere, not because he was naive, but because she had always seemed so certain. Certainty in the people we love can feel like competence. It is not always the same thing. Diane had found Lauren through Instagram 8 months earlier. She'd left a comment on one of Lauren's posts, the one with the closure sign, asking in plain text that is still visible if you know where to look, "Is this safe for beginners? I've never done Death Valley." Lauren replied publicly within the hour, "Totally fine if you're in decent shape. Come with us sometime." Diane was in decent shape. She was also, by every account, careful, the kind of person who reads the instructions, who double-checks the weather. She had trusted a public reassurance from someone with thousands of followers and a long track record of coming home. The third member of the group was Lauren's cousin Ryan, 29 years old. He'd grown up hiking with her in the Sierras. To him, Lauren wasn't a social media personality. She was just his older cousin who knew the outdoors. Family trust is its own particular weight. It doesn't ask for credentials. None of them had significant desert hiking experience. None of them had reason to question the packing list Lauren provided. The National Park Service recommends 1 liter of water per hour per person in extreme heat conditions. The group carried what witnesses at the trailhead later estimated as enough for a casual morning walk, the kind of supply you would bring to a farmer's market, not a canyon in the Mojave at the height of summer. They left Furnace Creek at approximately 11:30 in the morning. The park's own posted signage identifies the window between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. as the most dangerous period for physical exertion. The temperature at Furnace Creek that day was 122 degrees Fahrenheit. On exposed trail surfaces in Golden Canyon, ground temperatures were estimated at above 180 degrees. Before they reached the trailhead, Diane stopped to take a photo in the parking lot. She was smiling. She tagged the location. The post went live at 11:24 a.m., 6 minutes before they began walking. It was still live when search and rescue was deployed. They walked past a sign that read "Trail Closed, Extreme Heat." They walked past Ranger Castillo, who made verbal contact. Lauren told him they were fine. They walked into Golden Canyon at midday in 122-degree heat with inadequate water, past every warning the system had placed in their path. What happened next was not a mystery. It was physics. The human body is remarkably good at cooling itself up to a point. Sweat evaporates, pulling heat away from the skin, keeping core temperature in its narrow survivable range. It's an elegant system. In moderate heat, it works. But evaporative cooling has a ceiling. And in the dry desert air of Golden Canyon at midday, that ceiling arrives fast. When ambient temperature exceeds what sweat can offset, the body stops winning the argument with the environment. It starts losing it, quietly, in stages. The first stage feels like nothing much: thirst, a little fatigue. The kind of heaviness in the legs that experienced hikers have felt before and pushed through. This is the cruelest part of the sequence, because the symptoms of early heat stress feel almost exactly like the symptoms of a hard workout. The body is sending a signal, and the signal sounds like ordinary effort. The group would have felt this within the first mile. Golden Canyon offers no relief. The walls rise steeply on both sides, ochre and rust colored, beautiful in photographs, and they act as a radiant oven, bouncing heat back from every surface. There is no wind, there is no shade. The ground temperature beneath their feet was, by estimation, somewhere above 180 degrees. Every breath pulled hot air into lungs that were already working harder than they should. And here's where the science becomes genuinely frightening. By the time confusion sets in, the second stage, the victim has already lost the ability to accurately assess how bad things are. Disorientation masquerades as mild dizziness. The internal alarm system begins to malfunction at the exact moment it's needed most. Researchers studying Death Valley fatalities have documented this pattern repeatedly. The interval between I feel fine and I cannot walk can be as short as 20 minutes under peak conditions. 20 minutes. But here's what almost nobody talks about. That 20-minute window shrinks dramatically when a person is dehydrated going in. A 2019 study, published in the journal Wilderness and Environmental Medicine, found that hikers who began exertion already at 2% dehydration, a level most people cannot detect by thirst alone, hit heat exhaustion thresholds 31% faster than fully hydrated subjects. The group had been in the parking lot for at least 30 minutes before they started walking. In 122-degree heat. The clock had already started before they reached the trailhead. The trail does not forgive indecision. Golden Canyon's slot canyon approach offers almost no easy turnaround once a group has committed past the first significant bend. Pressing forward and turning back require the same expenditure of energy the body is already burning just to stay upright. They pass the point of no return without a sign marking it. There never is one. When core temperature climbs past 104 degrees Fahrenheit, the clinical threshold for heat stroke, the body begins making decisions the mind can no longer override. Sweating stops. The cooling mechanism shuts down entirely. What comes after is not a slow decline. It is a cascade. Think about a moment when you've been in intense heat, a car with the windows up, a packed stadium in August. Now imagine that feeling and the inability to leave it. What's your instinct in that moment? Drop a comment, because what the people in that canyon experienced was that instinct, with nowhere to go. The ranger who watched them disappear around the first bend later said he stood at the trailhead for a long moment after they were gone. He couldn't explain why. He just stood there, in 122-degree heat, watching the place where the canyon swallowed them whole. He said he felt something he couldn't name. By the time he could name it, he was already reaching for his radio. The radio call came in at 2:17 in the afternoon. Castillo's voice was measured, trained calm over something that wasn't calm at all. He reported a group of 4 who had entered Golden Canyon at approximately 11:30 a.m., past a posted closure, past a verbal warning. No contact since. Temperature at Furnace Creek, still 122 degrees. Search and rescue was mobilized within 11 minutes. They found Lauren first. She had made it back to the trailhead on her own, staggering, badly dehydrated, skin flushed and dry in the way that tells a paramedic everything they need to know before a single word is spoken. She was conscious. She was alone. The rescue team noted the time, 2:43 p.m., roughly 3 hours after the group had walked in together. What she told rangers in those first minutes was fragmented, the way speech becomes when the body has been pushed past its limits. She said the others had stopped. She said she tried. She said she didn't know how far back they were. The teams went in. What they found and where is part of the official record. 2 members of the group were recovered within a quarter mile of each other, deep in the canyon's radiant core. The third was found closer to the trailhead, which suggests he had turned back or tried to. The investigation would later note that none of them had shade, none had signaling equipment, and the group's combined water supply had been exhausted within the first 45 minutes of hiking. 45 minutes. Marcus, Diane, Ryan. They had trusted someone who had always come home before. That trust was not foolish, it was human, and it was fatal. The investigation that followed was thorough, documented, and in the legal sense, largely without consequence. Investigators confirmed every detail that made this feel preventable: the posted closure, the ranger's verbal warning on record, Lauren's prior advisory contacts entered into the file. The trail had been legally closed, the system had done what the system does. But here is where the grief gets complicated. Criminal negligence in a voluntary hiking scenario is extraordinarily difficult to prosecute. Death Valley's own legal framework treats adult entry as a form of informed consent to risk. Investigators found no mechanism, no statute, no precedent that translated Lauren's pattern of behavior into a chargeable offense. She had not forced anyone into that canyon. She had not hidden the heat. She had simply been wrong, confidently and repeatedly, until the desert collected what overconfidence always eventually costs. The families spoke publicly. Diane's family called for a formal permit system, for access controls during extreme heat windows, for a ban registry that could flag repeat offenders before they assembled another group. The park acknowledged the calls. Nothing changed. As of the following summer season, Death Valley still had no mandatory day hike permit requirement, no heat window access controls, and no formal mechanism for flagging repeat advisory contacts, despite a petition signed by more than 14,000 people in the months after the incident. And then there was Ranger Castillo. Not the one at the trailhead that day, but the one who had filed the original advisory report weeks earlier, the first warning that went nowhere. He gave a statement to investigators that has stayed with everyone who read it. We knew, we documented it, we didn't have the tools to stop it. That sentence is the hinge of this entire story, because it doesn't excuse the system. It indicts it quietly, from the inside, in the voice of someone who followed every protocol available and still watched it fail. The Rangers knew, the files knew, the record knew, and the record was not enough. If you've ever worked in a system where you could see the harm coming and had no authority to interrupt it, in healthcare, in schools, in any institution built on liability and consent, you know exactly what Castillo meant. Drop a comment. Have you ever been in a position where you saw something going wrong and the rules gave you no way to stop it? Because that's what this investigation kept circling back to. The legal question it could not answer: if a pattern of dangerous behavior is documented, filed, and ignored. At what point does the institution share the weight of what follows? There's a community of people who watch these stories not for the tragedy, but because they refuse to look away from the systems underneath it. If that's you, subscribing to this channel means joining others who believe that understanding how these failures happen is the only way to make them less likely. Not to support me, but because you think this kind of accountability matters. She survived, the system survived. And Death Valley's summer visitor numbers have not declined. In fact, the park recorded over 1.1 million visitors in June and July of the following year, a figure the Park Service itself described as a record for those months. Which means the only thing standing between the next group and the same outcome is a sign that some people still treat as a suggestion. The sign at the Golden Canyon Trailhead is made of aluminum. It measures roughly 18 by 24 inches. The text is printed in high contrast black on yellow, the color scheme the Park Service reserves for its most serious warnings. It reads, "Trail closed. Extreme heat, life-threatening conditions. Turn back now." It was there that morning. It is there today. Nothing about it has changed. The language is the same, the color is the same. The sun has faded it slightly at the edges, the way the desert fades everything eventually, but the words are still perfectly legible. Every person who approaches that trailhead in summer walks past it. Most of them stop, most of them read it, most of them turn around. Castillo stood at the trailhead after they disappeared around the first bend. He'd done everything the system gave him the ability to do: verbal warning, documentation, radio call. He had no legal authority to physically block a trail, no statute that converts a pattern of bad decisions into a detainable offense. He knew her file. He'd read the prior contacts, and he'd watched her walk past him anyway. He said later that the hardest part wasn't the recovery. It was the 40 minutes between when they walked in and when he knew something was wrong. 40 minutes where he kept hoping he was wrong about what he already knew. He wasn't wrong. And what happened in that canyon in those 40 minutes is something the science of extreme heat can explain in precise, terrible detail. The same science that rangers cite in every advisory report. The same science printed on informational placards at the Furnace Creek Visitor Center, available in 6 languages, free to anyone who walks through the door. The knowledge was never the problem. It was never hidden. It was posted, documented, radioed, and filed. 3 people walked past all of it because someone they trusted told them it didn't apply. That is the detail that stays with you. Not the heat, not the canyon, but the specific weight of misplaced trust in a place that has no tolerance for it.